When you check into a hotel, you expect a clean room and a comfortable bed. For most, it's a sanctuary from the road. But for some people, the hotel experience is a launchpad into a dimension where logic and common sense have checked out permanently. Today, we're opening the complaint book for 55 of the most baffling, hilarious, and downright dumbest grievances ever filed by hotel guests in America. Forget finding a hair on your pillow. We're talking about complaints that defy all logic. 1. A newlywed couple, upon returning from their honeymoon, complained to hotel management that the king-sized bed was, and this is a direct quote, far too comfortable. The result of this excessive comfort, they argued, was that they engaged in marital activities more often than planned, leading directly to an unexpected pregnancy. They argued the hotel was therefore partially responsible for their future child, and suggested that proper compensation would be free stays for life. 2. This one comes from a high-end steakhouse inside a Texas hotel, where a man sent his perfectly cooked, beautiful medium-rare steak back to the kitchen. The temperature was perfect. The taste was sublime. The problem, he explained to the utterly bewildered waiter with a completely straight face, was that the steak didn't moo when he cut into it. He genuinely believed that a truly fresh cut of beef should still exhibit some residual signs of life. 3. A woman filed a formal written complaint against her hotel because the male receptionist was, in her own words, too handsome. She claimed his chiseled good looks were professionally inappropriate and a constant distraction, which made her husband feel incredibly insecure, subsequently ruining their entire romantic anniversary weekend. So, the problem wasn't her husband's fragile ego, but the fact that the hotel had the nerve to hire someone who didn't look like a disgruntled garden gnome. 4. A guest was absolutely furious during checkout, accusing the hotel staff of total indifference and neglect. The reason for this scathing review? It was his birthday the day before, and not a single employee had wished him a happy birthday or arranged for a cake. His logic was unshakable. The hotel had scanned his driver's license at check-in, so they were fully aware of his date of birth. He argued that it was their professional duty to cross-reference that information and proactively celebrate their guests' life events. 5. A guest staying at a premium beachfront resort in Florida, in a room she specifically paid extra for to get an ocean view, stormed down to the front desk to demand a full refund. Her reason? The ocean was simply too loud at night. She claimed its persistent whooshing sound kept her from getting a good night's sleep. She was apparently under the very serious impression that the hotel manager possessed a cosmic remote control with a volume knob for the entire Atlantic Ocean. 6. At a completely non-smoking hotel, a guest called reception to complain that there was no ashtray in his room. The receptionist politely reminded him of the hotel's strict no-smoking policy. The guest replied, "I know that, but where am I supposed to put my ashes if I decide to ignore your rule?" His complaint wasn't about the policy itself, but about the hotel's lack of amenities to help him conveniently break it. The sheer audacity is almost impressive. 7. A woman in a hotel restaurant ordered the vegetarian curry. When the dish arrived, she took one look and summoned the manager, absolutely furious. Her complaint? There were actual vegetables in her vegetarian curry. She was under the impression that vegetarian was just the name of the dish's flavor profile, like Singapore noodles, and was horrified to find what she called rabbit food in her dinner. She insisted she was not a rabbit and demanded a proper meal, presumably one made entirely of sauce and her own confusion. 8. After a maintenance technician was called to a room to fix a broken television, he found a very frustrated guest pointing the air conditioner remote at the screen, clicking the buttons with increasing fury. The tech wordlessly picked up the actual TV remote from the nightstand and turned the television on. The guest, rather than being embarrassed, complained that the hotel should label its remotes more clearly for less technically inclined people, effectively blaming the hotel for his own mistake. 9. Picture a skilled bartender at a luxury hotel bar in New York City. A guest orders a simple scotch on the rocks. The bartender delivers a perfectly made drink in a crystal glass. The guest takes a sip, scowls, and calls him over. "This ice," the guest says, poking a perfectly clear cube with his finger. "It's far too cold." The bartender just stood there, speechless, trying to process the fundamental laws of physics that had just been challenged. What was the alternative? Lukewarm ice? The guest apparently expected his frozen water to come with its own personal thermostat. 10. A tourist staying at a rustic lodge bordering a national park in Wyoming filed a panicked complaint that the hotel's petting zoo was dangerously unregulated. The staff was, understandably, confused, as the lodge had no petting zoo. The guest then pointed out her window at a deer peacefully grazing on the lawn. She insisted that if the hotel was going to allow animals that close to the building, they should at least be fenced in and properly domesticated for guest interaction. She was, in essence, complaining that the wild part of the wilderness wasn't more like Disneyland. 11. A guest at a hotel famous for its complimentary breakfast buffet marched to the front desk in a rage, claiming the hotel was engaged in false advertising. His issue wasn't the quality or selection of the food. It was the fact that he had to physically serve himself. He genuinely expected a full-service, sit-down experience with a waiter to take his order, despite standing in a room with a giant sign that said, "Breakfast Buffet." Apparently, the grueling labor of using tongs to pick up a waffle was just too much to bear. 12. A woman called down to complain that her room hadn't been cleaned all day and she was running out of towels. When the manager reviewed the housekeeping logs, he saw that the "Do Not Disturb" sign had been on her door from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. When confronted with this, she replied, "Well, I didn't mean it for all day. You should have known when I was napping." Should hotel staff be required to develop psychic abilities to interpret the true meaning of a guest's door sign? 13. At a hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, just a stone's throw from the state line, an irate businessman stormed the front desk. His complaint: his cell phone displayed a "Welcome to Kansas" message upon his arrival. He accused the hotel of committing interstate fraud by falsely advertising its location. The manager had to patiently explain the concept of cell phone towers and how his phone was likely pinging one just across the border. The guest was unconvinced, suggesting the hotel should fix its signal to respect state sovereignty. Apparently, managing telecommunications infrastructure is now part of the hospitality industry. 14. At a scenic mountain lodge in Colorado, a businessman complained that his room's view was too good and unacceptably distracting. He claimed the breathtaking panoramic vista of the Rocky Mountains was preventing him from getting any work done on his laptop. He actually demanded to be moved to a room with a significantly less inspiring view, preferably one facing the dumpster or a brick wall, so he could finally focus on his spreadsheets. 15. A guest on the 25th floor of a Chicago skyscraper filed a formal safety complaint because his window wouldn't open. He insisted it was a major fire code violation and demanded to be moved to a room where he could get proper ventilation. The manager calmly explained that for very obvious safety reasons, windows in high-rise hotels are permanently sealed. This logic was completely lost on the guest, who argued that he was a responsible adult and wouldn't just fall out, accusing the hotel of treating him like a child. He was essentially demanding the right to create a massive safety liability, all for a bit of a breeze. 16. Blaming the hotel for a problem you personally created is a special kind of art form. A guest called the front desk in disgust, reporting a persistent and foul odor in his room, which he was convinced was a dead rodent in the vents. The manager, taking the claim seriously, sent maintenance to conduct a full investigation. After checking the vents, drains, and every possible source, they found the culprit tucked under the bed: a 3-day-old half-eaten box of takeout seafood. The guest wasn't embarrassed. He was indignant, arguing that the hotel should have had the foresight to check his room for forgotten food, even though he'd had the "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door the entire time. 17. A guest in a Las Vegas hotel casino complained that the slot machines were dishonest. not because they didn't pay out, but because the pictures of cherries on the reels didn't taste like cherries when he licked them. He accused the casino of false advertising and demanded compensation for the emotional distress caused by the flavorless fruit images. Security was called when he attempted to taste test the watermelons on another machine. 18. A couple complained that the ice from their in-room ice machine was melting too quickly. They insisted that the ice at their home in Alaska lasted for hours out on the counter and accused the hotel in Miami of deliberately making defective, fast-melting ice as part of a conspiracy to force guests to buy more expensive drinks from the bar. They were completely unwilling to accept that ambient temperature might play a small role in the process. 19. A man called the front desk in a panic, claiming that someone had broken into his room and glued all the furniture to the floor. The receptionist was, of course, alarmed and sent security up immediately. They arrived to find the guest trying to push the heavy, built-in hotel wardrobe across the room. He was 100% convinced that all hotel furniture was supposed to be easily movable, like in his own home. 20. A guest missed his flight and stormed the front desk, demanding the hotel pay for a new ticket because he overslept. His reason? He never received his 5 a.m. wake-up call. The manager, checking the system, found no record of the guest ever requesting one. When this was pointed out, the man shot back, "You should have had the common sense to ask me if I needed one." Apparently, front desk staff are now expected to be clairvoyant, psychically guessing guests' travel plans and setting alarms without ever being asked. 21. Hotel key cards can be tricky, but this was next level. A guest repeatedly came to the front desk, insisting his key was defective because it wouldn't open his door. After the third trip, a bellman went up with him to investigate. The guest walked to his door, pulled out his wallet, and confidently swiped his personal Visa credit card across the lock. When the bellman pointed out his error, the guest wasn't embarrassed. He was annoyed, complaining that the hotel system should be smart enough to recognize him from his credit card. 22. A furious European tourist accused a hotel of running a blatant scam. His complaint was that none of the electrical outlets in his room worked with his devices. He claimed the hotel must be using proprietary, non-standard wall sockets to force guests to rent or buy special adapters from them. The manager had the delicate job of explaining that these were, in fact, completely standard American outlets, and the problem was his European plug. The guest refused to believe it, convinced he had uncovered a vast corporate conspiracy. 23. A family staying at a historic hotel in Savannah, Georgia, demanded a room change in the dead of night. Their reason wasn't a leaky faucet or noisy neighbors. They claimed their room was being haunted by the ghost of a very active Civil War soldier. When the night manager calmly and professionally explained that paranormal activity was not something he could control, the guest shot back, "Well, you should. It's not listed as an amenity on your website. I guess complimentary ghost just doesn't have the same ring to it." 24. Attempting to cook a full meal using only the in-room coffee maker is a bold choice. A guest tried to heat up a can of chunky clam chowder by pouring it directly into the coffee pot's carafe and placing it on the hot plate. The result was a cracked pot, a scorched, stinking mess, and a broken machine. His complaint: the hotel was negligent for not providing a soup-compatible heating element in the room, arguing that the coffee maker was deceptively multifunctional in its appearance. 25. A guest stood at the checkout counter, red-faced and outraged, demanding that a charge be removed from his bill. The charge, however, wasn't from the hotel. It was a $75 city parking ticket. His unbelievable logic was that since the hotel's private garage was full, they had forced him to park on the street. Therefore, any fine he incurred while parked on public property was the hotel's financial responsibility. He was essentially arguing that the hotel manager should have control over municipal law and was personally liable for his decision to ignore a parking meter. 26. Getting a speeding ticket is frustrating, but for one guest the blame was clear: the hotel concierge. The man furiously argued that the concierge had provided perfect directions to a local attraction, but had critically failed to mention a well-known speed trap along the route. He insisted this omission made the hotel partially liable and demanded they reimburse him for the full cost of the fine. Apparently, providing driving directions now includes a legal requirement to also act as a real-time traffic law advisor. 27. At a hotel that proudly advertised itself as pet-friendly on every booking site, a guest called to complain about a dog barking down the hall. The manager politely reminded her that she had booked a stay at a pet-friendly establishment. Her unbelievable response was, "I know. I thought that just meant my pet was welcome, not everyone else's." In her world, hotel policies were apparently written exclusively for her. 28. A woman called a hotel's front desk in a total panic, claiming she had been driving around for an hour and couldn't find their building anywhere. After a few minutes of trying to give her directions, the increasingly confused receptionist asked her to confirm the address. It turned out the guest was in Portland, Oregon, while her reservation was for a hotel with the same brand name in Portland, Maine. Instead of admitting her mistake, she demanded a full refund from the main hotel because its name was too confusing. 29. Hotel maintenance was called to investigate why the communal hot tub was suddenly overflowing with bubbles and smelled strongly of lavender. They discovered a guest had been using it as his personal bathtub, complete with bath bombs, shampoo, and a loofah. When confronted, the man was completely unapologetic. He claimed his room's bathtub was inconveniently small and that the hot tub was simply a more luxurious, complimentary alternative. 30. A man stood at the checkout counter, meticulously inspecting his bill before declaring there was a mistake. The charge in question was for a $15 pay-per-view movie he had ordered the night before. His argument for a refund was simple. He fell asleep halfway through the film. With unshakable conviction, he explained that since he only consumed 50% of the product, he should only be charged 50% of the price. He even compared it to dining, arguing that a restaurant wouldn't charge for a full steak if he only ate half. The manager's attempt to explain that the fee was for unlocking. The movie, not for the minutes watched, was met with a glare of pure, unadulterated indignation. 31. During a torrential downpour in Miami, a woman called the front desk with an urgent complaint. She was furious that the outdoor swimming pool was getting wet from the rain and demanded to know why the staff hadn't closed the pool roof to protect it. The receptionist had the unenviable task of explaining repeatedly that there was no roof because it was, in fact, an outdoor pool. The guest was not satisfied, accusing them of laziness and poor planning for not having a giant, retractable dome on standby for such occasions. 32. Imagine complaining that nature is being too natural. A guest at a tranquil countryside inn demanded a room change because the birds outside his window were chirping too loudly in the morning. He described it as an unacceptable acoustic intrusion on his vacation. When the manager explained that the local bird population was somewhat outside of their direct control, the guest suggested the hotel should invest in some kind of bird silencing technology, or at least issue earplugs to all guests as a standard amenity. 33. A guest left a note for housekeeping that simply said, "Please tidy room." They returned that evening to find the bed made, fresh towels, and the trash emptied. They immediately called the manager to complain that the housekeeper had not followed instructions. The problem? They had left a pile of their dirty clothes on a chair and were genuinely furious that the housekeeper hadn't taken the initiative to fold them all and put them away in the drawers. At what point does housekeeping become personal butler service? This guest had a very clear answer. 34. A tourist staying in the very heart of New Orleans' French Quarter called the manager to complain about the noise. It wasn't a party or construction, it was a live jazz band playing on the street below. He said the incessant trumpet was ruining his quiet evening in. His proposed solution wasn't just to stop them. He asked if the manager could please go tell those musicians to play something else, like maybe some soft rock. He had booked a trip to the birthplace of jazz to complain about jazz. 35. One guest booked a junior suite at a downtown hotel and was expecting a sprawling multi-room penthouse. When he was shown to a large single room with a defined sitting area, he was outraged. He accused the hotel of false advertising and semantic trickery. He fixated on the word suite, completely ignoring the qualifier junior, and insisted he was the victim of a bait and switch, demanding to be upgraded to what he called a real adult suite at no extra charge. 36. The circular logic on this one is breathtaking. A guest ordered a large pizza with extra garlic and onions from room service. About an hour later, he called the front desk to complain that his room now had a powerful and lingering smell of garlic and onions. He wasn't just asking for air freshener. He demanded a full refund for the pizza, arguing that if the food was going to damage the room's atmosphere, it should have come with a warning label. 37. Everyone has seen a yellow "Caution Wet Floor" sign. But for one guest, it simply wasn't enough. After slipping near a freshly mopped area, he didn't sue for damages. He filed a complaint about the sign itself. He argued that the simple, universal graphic was too subtle and lacked a sense of genuine urgency. He suggested the hotel should upgrade to signs with flashing lights and a loud, audible warning to properly convey the danger. Have you ever seen someone blame a warning sign for not being dramatic enough? 38. A guest called down to the concierge, furious that the city bus tour he'd been recommended had ruined his shoes. He explained that the tour involved getting off the bus and walking for a few blocks around a historic district. He was appalled that the concierge had failed to warn him that the tour would involve significant physical exertion and contact with unpredictable city pavement. He was, in all seriousness, seeking compensation from the hotel for his own choice of footwear. 39. A couple staying in a beautiful room overlooking a city park complained to management that their privacy was being invaded. The culprits weren't drones or paparazzi. They were the ordinary people walking around in the public park below. The guests insisted that the people on the ground could theoretically look up and see them in their fourth-floor window, and demanded the hotel do something about it. They were essentially complaining that their city view came with a city. 40. A guest claimed he had sustained a serious sprain while attempting to open the complimentary bottle of water left in his room. With unshakable seriousness, he argued that the bottle cap was dangerously over-tightened and constituted defective packaging. He wasn't just annoyed, he was formally complaining, implying the hotel was liable for his injury because they had provided the product. He was, in effect, trying to file a personal injury claim for the extreme sport of staying hydrated. 41. The concept of the minibar proved to be a source of profound confusion for one guest. Upon checking out, he was stunned to see charges for the snacks and drinks he had consumed. With a look of genuine betrayal, he told the manager, "If you didn't want me to eat it, you shouldn't have put it in my room." He wasn't joking. He was operating under the assumption that the fully stocked price-listed minibar was just a complimentary welcome basket, a sort of all-you-can-eat free-for-all. 42. A guest at a beautiful seaside resort in Maine called the front desk to lodge a formal complaint about the unpleasant odor outside. When asked to describe it, he said it was sort of fishy and salty. He was, in fact, complaining about the smell of the ocean. He suggested the hotel should do something about it, perhaps by spraying some kind of industrial-strength deodorizer along the beach to make the coastline more pleasant for those who apparently hate the coast. 43. In an attempt to add a nice touch, a housekeeper folded a bath towel into the shape of a swan and left it on the bed. An hour later, the front desk received a panicked call from the room. The guest was whisper-shouting that there was a strange creature in his bed, and he was too scared to get close. When security arrived, they found the man pointing at the towel swan, claiming its aggressive posture and unblinking stare made him feel threatened. 44. A businessman left a scathing one-star review because the valet service was, in his words, thoughtless. The valet had retrieved his car perfectly without a scratch. The problem? The car had been parked facing west. The guest's complaint detailed how the valet should have known, based on the morning sun, to park the car facing east so the driver's seat wouldn't be hot when he got in. How on earth was a valet supposed to psychically predict his departure time and preferred seat temperature? 45. During a heat wave, the hotel pool was understandably crowded. One guest, however, felt this was unacceptable. He complained to the lifeguard that other swimmers were violating his personal aquatic bubble. He wasn't claiming anyone had touched him, but that their mere proximity was stressful. His proposed solution? He asked if the lifeguard could rope off a dedicated lane in the middle of the public pool for his exclusive use, so he could float in peace. 46. A complaint was once filed against a hotel for its own shadow. A guest with a poolside-facing room was irate that in the late afternoon, the hotel building itself cast a shadow over the pool area, cutting his personal tanning time short by about an hour. He demanded a partial refund on his room, arguing that the hotel was improperly designed and its architectural flaws were actively interfering with his access to the sun. 47. A guest called the front desk to complain about the unreasonable burden placed upon him by the ice machine's location. The machine wasn't broken or out of ice. It was simply located about 10 doors down the hall from his room. He described the 40-foot walk as an exhausting trek and insisted that for the price he was paying, the hotel should either offer an on-demand ice delivery service or, preferably, install an ice machine in every single room. What's the absolute laziest complaint you've ever heard? 48. Knocking on a door is a universally understood signal. But not for one guest. He filed a formal complaint after a room service delivery, stating he was severely startled by the knock. His reasoning? His room didn't have a doorbell. He argued that knocking was an archaic and aggressive method of getting someone's attention, and that a modern hotel should have a gentler, more civilized doorbell system on every single door. 49. After ordering a slice of New York cheesecake from room service and eating the entire thing, a guest called down to demand a refund. He claimed he had a delayed onset dairy intolerance and that the dessert had made him feel unwell. His logic was that even though he knowingly ordered and consumed the item, his body's subsequent reaction meant he hadn't properly enjoyed the product, and therefore he shouldn't have to pay for it. He was essentially trying to get a refund for his own biology. 50. In a classic case of misdirected anger, a guest complained that the hotel's pillows were giving him nightmares. He didn't claim they were uncomfortable or lumpy. He was 100% convinced that there was something inside the pillows, some kind of negative energy or bad dream-inducing material that was specifically targeting him. He demanded that housekeeping bring him a new set of psychologically neutral pillows so he could sleep without being terrorized. 51. Imagine getting a complaint about cleanliness being too effective. A guest once lodged a grievance that the bed sheets were too white. He claimed the intense, brilliant whiteness was physically hurting his eyes, and he simply couldn't fall asleep. He then seriously asked if they had any sheets in a more off-white or perhaps a gentle beige to soothe his sensitive retinas. You can just picture the housekeeping manager standing in a laundry room filled with thousands of identical white sheets, contemplating the logistics of brewing a giant vat of tea just to stain a set for this one guy. 52. The concept of property-wide Wi-Fi was put to the ultimate test by one guest who complained that the internet connection was unacceptably weak. After a lengthy troubleshooting call with the front desk, the guest finally revealed his location. He wasn't in his room or even in the lobby. He was sitting in his car at the far edge of the parking lot, trying to stream a movie before driving off. He was genuinely angry that the Wi-Fi signal didn't extend 100 yards out to cover every inch of the hotel's asphalt. 53. After a guest stepped into the hallway to grab the ice bucket, his room door clicked shut behind him, locking him out. This is a common occurrence, but his complaint was unique. He marched to the front desk, wearing only a towel, and complained that the hotel's self-locking doors were a design flaw and a safety hazard. He insisted that the doors should have a feature that consents if the occupant is decently clothed before engaging the lock to prevent such embarrassing situations. 54. A man arrived at the complimentary breakfast buffet at 11:30 a.m. to find it had been cleared away. He didn't just complain that he missed it, he claimed the hotel was discriminating against people with alternative sleep schedules. He argued that the 10 a.m. cutoff was a form of oppression against night owls and demanded that the kitchen staff prepare him a fresh, made-to-order breakfast to compensate for their chronological intolerance. 55. A guest called the front desk around midnight to complain about a very bright, intrusive light shining into his room and ruining his sleep. The night manager politely suggested he try closing the blackout curtains. The guest's response, delivered with pure frustration, was, "I did. It's not helping. Can't you do something about the moon?" He was, in all seriousness, lodging a formal complaint against the Earth's natural satellite and fully expected the hotel staff to be able to dim it for him. And that concludes our tour through 55 monuments to human delusion, proving that in the world of hospitality, common sense often checks out early. These are the stories that make it into the logbooks, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. So now we turn it over to you. What is the single most ridiculous, mind-bendingly absurd complaint you have ever personally witnessed or heard secondhand? Drop your story in the comments below, because we know you have them. If these tales of absurdity made you feel a little more sane, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the wild world of customer complaints.